From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, ET Technologies. And in a moment, you're going to hear a couple fantastic stories about Marilyn Monroe and Frank Sinatra. Here's what's happening. More tragedy over the weekend and today. A shooting in Northern California left at least 7 people dead following shootings at 2 farms and a suspect in police custody. The San Mateo County Sheriff's Office says deputies responded to a shooting at a mushroom farm on San Mateo Road in unincorporated San Mateo County. They found 4 people dead from gunshot wounds. Then a 5th victim was taken to Stanford Medical Center with life-threatening injuries. A short time later, deputies responded to another farm, a trucking soil farm, where they found 3 more deceased victims. My gosh. The death toll from that mass shooting at a ballroom dance hall in Monterey Park, California over the weekend has now risen to 11. The gunman, 72-year-old, apparently killed himself. And it continues. 2 students shot to death Monday afternoon at a charter school in Des Moines, Iowa, that is tailored for disadvantaged youths and has close ties to police. Killed were an 18-year-old male and a 16-year-old male. An 18-year-old was arrested, faces 2 counts of murder. Unbelievable. Ultrasound therapy could delay, stop, or even reverse the aging process, according to a new study. Scientists in Texas are working on turning back the clock on human cells by zapping them with low-frequency waves. The process restarts cell division, awakening them from a zombie-like state that triggers cell dysfunction and even disease. After a year of soaring prices for everyday goods and interest rates, Americans are increasingly leaning on credit cards to make ends meet, and although pandemic-era stimulus payments were able to keep delinquencies at bay by bolstering household savings for a time, these accounts have since dwindled, and signs of a looming debt crisis among U.S. consumers beginning to grow. You can get free high-definition content, including sports, news, drama, and comedies, just about everywhere in the U.S. Networks are more broadcasting their shows right away and streaming them, and all you need to do is get an antenna and maybe a separate, inexpensive tuner. Even better, it's all going to be free. Lauren Weinstein's with us to talk about this latest technology. This is incredible. This is better than cable.
Well, you remember, George, back when we all had to get converter boxes or new TVs for the switch from analog to digital TV? That was around 2009. You ready to go through that all again?
Well, buy Roku or something.
The problem with streaming, of course, and streaming has obviously grown enormously, is that it's getting quite expensive. The streaming services, many of them have been raising their prices, sometimes rather dramatically, and it's starting to add up. So these over-the-air program systems that are on the sub-channels of main channels are becoming more and more important. But the thing is that a similar transition to what occurred in 2009 is happening right now, because the current digital TV broadcasting system will be obsoleted by a new one, which, of course, won't be backwards compatible. So it will require all new equipment. So the current digital TV standard is called ATSC 1.0. That's for Advanced Television Systems Committee. There was an ATSC 2.0, but it was obsoleted so quickly you missed it if you blinked. So everything moved to 3.0, which is also called Next Gen TV. And 3.0 has lots of stuff in it. It can do 4K HDR. It has better interference rejection, mobile capabilities. Will probably work with the same kind of TV antennas you have for digital TV now. It can use an internet connection for a return data path for premium content, opt-in tracking of what you're watching, and a range of other new features that may or may not appear. It could do lots of stuff. Now, it's important to know that this transition is not mandatory for stations to make the way the original digital transition was. But it's pretty safe to assume that most stations are going to want to use it because they want to monetize these new 3.0 features. Now, the stations that bring up 3.0, and there's a lot of them across the country already, have to keep their current 1.0 transmissions going for some period of time, but it's not quite clear how long. Some sources say 2025, some say 5 years after bringing up 3.0. Presumably, most broadcasters are going to wait until there's enough 3.0 capable TVs and or converter boxes out there because they don't want to be cutting off millions of people that could be viewing. So it'll probably mostly be a matter of how rapidly the TVs that people have currently cycle out for new ones. So the timing's hard to pin down. But again, these new signals, these new ATSC 3.0 signals, are coming up on stations around the country all the time now. Most major cities have at least one now in many parts of the country. But it is understandable if everybody sort of gets a here we go again feeling when you think about having to have all new equipment again, especially when the benefits of going from 1.0 to 3.0 aren't going to be anywhere near as dramatic probably as from analog to digital. That was a very big jump. But again, with Internet streaming services becoming increasingly expensive, it's going to be a very useful proposition for many people to be looking again at over-the-air television as these new features come online, because there's a bottom line to how much people can afford to pay for TV.
Remember the days when we had just three networks?
Three networks and just a handful of channels, and you were lucky if there was any UHF at all. It was a whole different world. There's an oddity to this new 3.0 system that I was thinking about, which is in a way we're coming back full circle, because one of the things it can offer is like pay-per-view kind of programming, pay TV programming. And in the days before cable was widely available, many cities had over-the-air TV channels that either all the time or part-time would broadcast scrambled signals with movies and such, and people could pay a monthly fee to get a device to unscramble those, and that was all over-the-air. Now, once again, we're back to over-the-air. Everything old is new again.
Here we go. Lauren, thanks. This is an incredible story. Earth's inner core has recently stopped spinning and now be reversing the direction of its rotation, according to a surprising new study that probed the deepest reaches of our planet with seismic waves from earthquakes. The mind-boggling results suggest that Earth's center pauses and reverses direction on a periodic cycle lasting about 60 to 70 years, a discovery that might solve long-standing mysteries about climate and geological phenomena that occur on a similar time frame, and that affects life on our planet. How about that? Talking about things on our planet and outside of the planet, here's Stephen Cates, Dr. Sky. Hello, Dr. Sky.
Hi there, George. Wow, lots of information and something to add on to the story a little bit later, what you just mentioned. George, with Mars high in our January skies at sunset, we look closer to the red planet for some amazing and very incredible records. Back on May of 2022, the Mars InSight lander registered a 4.7 magnitude earthquake. That was the largest earthquake ever recorded on Mars. Modest by Earth standards, but it lasted for an incredible 4 hours. That's amazing. The InSight lander, George, has cataloged more than 1,300 Mars quakes since landing on the planet back in 2018. But unlike the Earth, Mars does not have tectonic plates, but may have had them in the geologic past. This planet is fascinating. Mars does not have a magnetic field also, but when the planet was only 500 million years old, its magnetic field died out. Nobody knows why. Finally, as you were talking about, scientists tell us that the Earth's inner solid core may have slowed down, stopped, with a possible reversing in the future. But they tell us not to worry. Now, they say that this has occurred before and may account for changes in the Earth's rotation, George, that are measured the strangeness of the millisecond changes that we've noticed either speeding up or slowing down. But more information on Mars. Sunsets on Mars, George, are blue, not red. Like on Earth, we see, of course, a red sunset. Its atmosphere of Mars is mostly carbon dioxide and iron-rich dust, which creates a red Martian sky in the day. But as the sun sets on Mars, the dust preserves the short blue wavelengths of light, and we get a most amazing blue sunset. Now, wouldn't that, George, be an incredible sight to see?
Sure would.
Totally bizarre. We go to the comet in the sky, Comet ZTF C 2022 E3. Its acronym stands for Zwicky, Transit Facility Comet. This discovery is now on a path, that is the comet, near the Earth. Presently, the comet is some 37 million miles away as we're speaking live. But closest to us on February 2nd, it's some 26 million miles. And an interesting factoid on comets. They can actually have three tails, a dust tail, a plasma tail, and an anti-tail. Comet ZTF, George, has all three now, as this beautiful series of images are coming in from around the world. But here we go. The anti-tail is really an illusion, as this particular comet or others crosses the plane of the Earth's orbit. Here we go. The comet is now circumpolar. For most observers in the northern hemisphere, that means it's visible mostly all night from faint city and away from city lights, and city dwellers will obviously have to use a pair of binoculars. I was out last night, and I did get to see it. See it before the moon brightens by week's end. But, George, more information always on this particular comet at theskylive.com. Live Sky, we wrap it up. What a beautiful planetary conjunction. Venus and Saturn make for a nice pair, low in the southwest at sunset all week. But the moon is also a nice crescent right now, also in the southwest. It reaches first quarter on the 28th. Great views in the sky. Emails, we love them, drsskyshow@gmail.com. We say it always, we mean it. Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. Simply, I'm your navigator, and the show's on the highway to the heavens. But, George, there's only some 441 days, or thereabouts, till the great total solar eclipse of April 8th, 2024. Why am I mentioning it so soon? Because we have to prepare early for this, and maybe as we talk here on Coast, some surprises indeed. So stay tuned.
I will do that. Thank you. Up next, a former Los Angeles police detective joins us with two incredible stories about Marilyn Monroe and Frank Sinatra. Mike Rothmiller is next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Let me tell you about tonight's guest. Mike Rothmiller served for 10 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, including 5 years as an undercover detective with its Organized Crime Intelligence Division. He's the author of numerous books. His first, L.A. Secret Police Inside the Elite LAPD Spy Network, was a New York Times bestseller. Back in 2021, he wrote Bombshell about Marilyn Monroe. We'll get into that. And also Frank Sinatra and the Mafia Murders, which he wrote last year, that has come out just recently. Alongside his dedication to public service, Mike has established a media career, producing television documentaries and working as a correspondent and presenter for PBS, ESPN, and other channels. Mike, welcome to the program. First time for you, right?
First time. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, and thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Tell me a little bit more about you.
Well, I worked started out as a young guy working for LAPD. I was there 10 years. I worked a variety of assignments. I was a patrol officer, patrol training officer, a patrol supervisor. I worked a tour of Vice, which was interesting, in Hollywood and other places. And then I made detective, and I was transferred immediately into the Organized Crime Intelligence Division. And at the time, I was the youngest person ever to transfer in, especially just after making detective. And after leaving LAPD, I became a TV reporter, and then I went to ESPN as an exec producer and host of my own shows, and did some for PBS. And then I retired because I was tired of the travel with television production, and I took a position with Sony Electronics, heading 3 of their divisions in the western United States.
Good for you. Good for you.
I've written books along the line, quite a few books.
Well, for the first half, we're going to talk about Marilyn Monroe. You wrote a book back in 2021, and the title tells a lot. Bombshell, the night Bobby Kennedy killed Marilyn Monroe. We've got a guest, Mike, named Mark Shaw, who comes on quite a bit, a very extensive researcher. He, too, believes what you believe, so we'll get into that. But how did you get interested in the Marilyn Monroe case?
Well, when I first went into OCID, OCID, LAPD's Organized Crime Intelligence Division, started in 1932. It was called the Gangster Squad, the Hat Squad, the Red Squad. Then they finally changed the name to the Organized Crime Intelligence Division. And what they did was maintain dossiers in the same fashion J. Edgar Hoover did. Obviously on the mafia guys, organized crime guys, we had dossiers, but also we had dossiers on politicians, entertainers, athletes, college coaches, you name it, anybody that was influential, anybody who was rich, anybody who wielded power, not only in the United States but in other countries. We maintained intelligence dossiers on them. Now, those dossiers were only shared with the chief of police. They never went anyplace else. And what was truly interesting about it is When I was there were roughly 60 detectives within division. During the 5 years I was in there, we never made one arrest. We were prohibited from arresting anybody by orders through the years of the chiefs of police. And the reason being that they were afraid that if you get subpoenaed to court for a case, you're going to be deposed. And the secrets of LAPD's intelligence gathering may start coming out. And some of the tactics that were used were illegal. We had two guys that were electronics experts, and all they did was do wiretapping and so forth, even though that was completely illegal. The unit operated in the same fashion as J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. There were black bag jobs. I saw that. I saw people wiretapping, intercepting telephone calls, and the chief of police would use the intelligence we gathered on people to basically keep them in line or to convert them to be his friend or his ally. And what I'm speaking of there is primarily entertainers.
So that's why they kept these dossiers.
Yes, absolutely. Major entertainers, politicians. I saw, I saw files on several presidents. I saw files on many governors of California, state senators, congressmen, you name it, judges. They were all there. The dossiers were there. Some of the main targets were media people, especially within the L.A. area. They wanted information, they meaning the chief of police and the unit, on TV reporters, reporters for the Times, and at that time the Herald Examiner, and you go back to all the papers. They wanted intelligence on them, primarily information that the chief of police could use to kill a story or, for a better term, try to keep them in line. I knew there were surveillances being run on Lou Wasserman, who headed Universal at the time, and I knew of surveillances that were done on Shelby Coffey, who was the head of the LA Times back then. And so those are the people, a lot of them, that were targeted. They were never suspected of any criminal activity, but the chief of police wanted the information. So that's what the unit did.
And somewhere along the line, you came across some information and people about the Marilyn Monroe case.
Yes, I did. When I first went into OCID, I started looking through the files that were very extensive, and I started seeing names of, like Mayor Tom Bradley was the mayor then. I saw an intelligence card on him, and there's a dossier on him. And then I went to other politicians, and then I started looking at entertainers, and they all had dossiers. So I happened to pull out Marilyn Monroe's dossier, and I was going through it, and her dossier was linked to John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Peter Lawford, Frank Sinatra, you name it, to a lot of people like that. And that led me to pulling their intelligence files and reading their dossiers. And I was amazed at what was there within the LAPD files. Most of the information on those people, except for Sinatra and some on John Kennedy, were just about their activities, what they're doing, who they're having an affair with, and so forth. And like so JFK, he was attached to Sam Giancana from the Chicago Mafia. He headed the Chicago Mafia. And
well, Sam pulled a few votes for JFK.
He pulled a lot of them, yes. And so that's where I got into it. And when I started getting into the files, deeply into the files, I started seeing a guy's name kept popping up, and that was a guy named Fred Otash. And I looked into Fred, and I realized, well, wait a minute, there's an intelligence file on Fred. He was a former LA cop, but he was a private investigator for many years. He was doing all sorts of things. One foot legal, in the legal arena, the next step, he was in the criminal world. But Fred, I started speaking to him, and he became an informant, and he's the gentleman who put the bugs in Marilyn's house and in Peter Lawford's house. He also wiretapped their homes.
Hold on for a second, Mike. We're coming up to the bottom break, but we will return and come back and talk about this case and later on about Frank Sinatra right here on Coast to Coast AM. George Norrie back with Mike Rothmiller, his books, Frank Sinatra and the Mafia Murderers and Bombshell. Tell us more about Fred Otash, Mike.
Yeah, Freddie was an interesting guy. He wiretapped plenty of people, and when I was talking to him, when he basically became an informant, I asked him on Marilyn's house, I said, why did you put the wires in there and the bugs? And he gave me the history of it. He says, well, the first person that asked him to do that and pay them was a representative came from Jimmy Hoffa.
Jeez.
And so he first started putting the bugs in for Hoffa. He says then the CIA came to him, and then the FBI came to him, and they were all paying him. And he said it was kind of interesting that the only, which I didn't believe, but he says the only people that I gave all the information to was LAPD intelligence. And I said, why is that, Fred? He says, well, the rest of them, they don't know what I got. But he says, I live in L.A. He says, you guys can make my life miserable if you wanted to. And so he claimed that he gave all the information he gathered to LAPD intelligence, but I didn't buy it. But he certainly gave a lot because I read the transcripts of the wiretaps and the bugs that he planted. And what is real interesting is in LAPD, the intelligence division, I came across a copy of Marilyn Monroe's long-lost diary. And I didn't know what I was reading at first, and I started reading it, and I realized I flipped the pages, and I looked and said, oh, it was listed as Monroe's diary. And so at the time, I took notes immediately, verbatim from the book, notes that I understood.
You published some of them. Some of it's too graphic to
yes.
announce, but I got to tell you, I held my magnifying glass over it to read it, and she was pretty graphic. My God.
Yeah, and I said I can believe the other things that she wrote about. I had no idea what she's talking about or who she's talking about, but only the people that I knew by name and what she was talking about, and primarily was about Jack Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and she talked about the sex acts and so forth. So that's all in the book. But one thing people have to understand is that LAPD intelligence, going back to, well, at least the Black Dahlia murder.
Right.
LAPD intelligence would run an intelligence investigation into that death. They would never share the information with the homicide guys that were actually handling it. That information was only gathered for the chief of police. And a lot of the reasons were, one, is that the tactics that were used were completely illegal. For instance, on the Black Dahlia, I read the file on that, the intelligence investigation, and they knew who the Black Dahlia killer was. But because of the tactics that were used, they couldn't do anything about it.
And I don't think it was that Hodel guy, was it?
No. Oh, no. It wasn't him at all. But that got it. But also, Marilyn Monroe's death, they did the same thing. And I read that, and that's what really turned me on to this back then as far as, wait a minute, I heard what went out publicly, but the intelligence information was just the opposite. It laid it out, what happened that night. And I saw, when I was in there, a guy named Neil Spotts was Daryl Gates's go-to guy for problems. He worked OCID, and he would handle the problems for Gates. And he handled the reinvestigations of the RFK assassination, of Marilyn, and so forth. And I was sitting there talking to him one day about Monroe, and he pulled out from his desk a manila envelope. Here, look at this. And I started pulling, and there were photographs, black and white. They were surveillance photographs taken of Marilyn, JFK at different times, of Robert Kennedy and Peter Lawford the night she died, that afternoon and that evening. And so I asked him, so where did all these come from? He said, well, the guys that were here then were on surveillance. They were following Bobby Kennedy when he came to town. They knew he was coming to town.
Yeah, he was there when she died, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, exactly. And so I saw this information, I read it, and things didn't jive. And it just happened to be that in the spring of 82, working intelligence, we had access to a lot of things people didn't have access to. One was the Playboy Mansion. So I took my wife and a buddy and his girlfriend and said, "You want to go to the Playboy Mansion? Check it out." Yeah, sure. Who wouldn't? So I took him up there. It was on a weekend, and lo and behold, who do we bump into there? Was Peter Lawford. He was just drunk or on drugs.
What year was that?
That would have been the spring of '82.
Okay, yeah, she was long since dead.
Yeah, and so I heard this TV playing in this side room, and while the security guy's giving them a tour, I walked in there to see who was in there, and I'm staring at this guy, and he's watching the TV, and then he finally turns and looks at me, and then it clicked who he was. Oh, that's Peter Lawford. So I spoke to him very briefly. I brought my wife and my friends in afterwards, said, "Hey, look, Mr. Lawford, blah, blah, blah." And that was the end of it. So when I was in there the first time, I put my business card in his pocket, in his shirt pocket, and I just said, I wrote on there, "Call me."
Take this, yeah.
He calls the following week. He had no idea who I was. He didn't remember me. He didn't remember meeting me or anything. Anyway, we set up a meeting, and we meet in a park, public park up near the Playboy Mansion. And I started talking to him. First, I was testing his memory, and it was fine. And I was also trying to detect his breath. There was no alcohol. He didn't seem to be under the influence of any drugs or alcohol then. And I just started talking to him prior to Marilyn's death, building up to it. He was accurate as far as everything I knew. And then I asked him...
So he backed up everything that you had heard.
Yeah, exactly. What I already knew, I was asking him questions to verify to see, check his memory, but then also see if he was going to be straight with me. And he was. And so finally we got into it, and I said, tell me what happened the night Marilyn died. What'd you guys do, you and Bobby? And he started rattling off the same old story that was scripted for him long ago, from LAPD intelligence. And I just stopped him. I said, "No, that's all BS. You're lying to me. Tell me what happened." He got a little indignant, and he stood up, and I thought he was going to walk away. So I got up, and we're standing face to face. And I went from an interview to an interrogation at that stage.
And it wasn't like you were going to arrest the guy.
No. And I told him that. I said, "You're not under investigation. Nobody's coming after you. Everybody's dead. I just want to know what happened." And I got into his face about it, and he sat down on the bench again, and he just cradled his face, and I sat down next to him, and he just said, "What do you want to know?" I just said, "Just tell me the truth, what happened." And at that stage, he laid it out. Everything that he and Bobby did that night, as far as in the afternoon when he came to town, going to Marilyn's house first time, and then later that evening when they went back, what happened in the house, the fight that was going on between Marilyn and Bobby. That's all in the book. And then the drink that he walked into the kitchen, he saw Bobby with a glass, a clear glass. He thought it was
So he didn't get somebody to do it. You're saying he did it.
Well, this is what Peter's saying, yeah. And so he said he has a spoon, and he's stirring this, mixing something with this glass of water, and he said, "I thought it was just a sedative or something to calm Marilyn down because she was really upset."
Over what?
Well, they were arguing the whole time prior to this for about a good 15 or 20 minutes.
Over the relationship?
The relationship. She was screaming at Robert. He pushed her down and in the bedroom, and they were looking. He and Peter were searching the house.
Now, she was still seen at the time, both John and Robert, right?
At the very end, from everything the intelligence had, is that it was Robert, because their relationship was cut off.
With the president.
Yeah, correct. And so he says they walk into the room, and where Marilyn's seated in the living room, and he gives her this glass to drink, and Peter says, "Yeah, just drink it down." And he just thought it was a mild sedative sometime, just to calm her down because she was screaming. And they did. She drank it down. She complained of the taste, took the glass, rubbed it back into the kitchen, put it back in the kitchen, and then they started looking around the house again. And when they came back, he said not long afterwards that he wasn't sure on the time. He said it could have been 5, could have been 10 minutes, could have been 15. But he said he's looking at her on the couch, and she's out of it. She's just laying back, her head's back, and she looks ashen and gray. And he was getting very concerned, so he goes over to her, and he's looking at her, and he's thinking, wait, she's looking really horrible.
Like she's dying, right?
Exactly. And he says about that time, now I'm paraphrasing everything, summing it up, but it's all in the book, but there's a knock on the door, and he thinks it's one of the neighbors called the police because they were screaming so loud earlier.
Jeez. And where was the maid, Mike?
Nobody was there. He said it was him, Bobby, and Marilyn. That was it in the house at the time.
Okay.
And from the intelligence and from what Fred Otash told me and from reading the wiretaps and the transcripts from the bugs that were in the house, that was it. And so when they go to the door, there's 2 guys standing there, for better term, in plain clothes. And he said, Bobby just walked up. Those guys stepped back. We just walked out. Bobby said, let's go. And they started walking to the car. And he said, well, who are these guys? He said, just get in the car. We got to go. He says he saw the 2 guys walk in. They closed the door. And then he takes Bobby to the airport.
They're the ones who moved the body.
Exactly. Now, here's the really interesting, important aspect of it. I asked him, I said, well, do you know these guys, who they were, either one of them? And he says, well, I don't remember the name, but he says, the one guy, yeah, I recognized him. And so I started thinking, well, wait a minute. You recognize him. Why did you recognize him? Where'd you see him? He says, well, when in the past, years earlier, when JFK would come to town, before being president, and Bobby he said this guy he was a cop, he would pick him up, and he says he'd drive him around and take care of them. And so I said, was his name Hamilton? He goes, yeah, that's it. Hamilton was the captain of LAPD intelligence. He was running the unit, and he was very close to Robert Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, and he would also run interference for them. When they would come out, he would help, once again, before he was president, he would help gather some young ladies from the Hollywood area to entertain them in their hotel. The hotel room generally they had was at the Biltmore, because the chief of police, Parker, at the time, he had a comp suite there all the time. And they would come in and they would use it under an assumed name, and Hamilton was the one making sure everything was running smoothly for both Robert and Jack Kennedy.
They were out of control, weren't they, Mike?
Yeah, pretty much. And he also served one time, because we're talking about Sinatra too a bit, but Sinatra used to live in the valley at a house up on a hill when there wasn't much out in the valley then. And they had a sex party there one night where it was Sinatra, Sammy, and a few other guys, and Jack Kennedy came out for a bit, but so did Robert. And so Hamilton and another guy from OCID, they were stationed at the bottom of the hill to make sure nobody got near the party, because it wasn't a huge party, but still it was a party going on with a lot of women. And if the media got near, they would just push them out of there, get them out of there. Or if anybody became curious, they would just say, hey, police, leave, get out of here.
What do you think, Mike, as we get to the top of the hour,
Sure.
and we'll come back and talk about Sinatra, what do you think Marilyn was going to say that got them to kill her?
Well, from the wiretaps and from Freddie, who ran them and listened to all of them, and from the intelligence, she was going to go public.
About the affairs?
About the affairs, yes. She was going to go public, and there's a guy in the book, was one of her friends, a longtime friend, Jose, and she was talking to him.
He's in her notes.
Pardon me?
That Jose is in a lot of her notes.
Yes, correct. And she told him that she was going to hold a press conference, and lay them out because at that stage they were basically throwing her to the side.
And that would have destroyed his reelection.
It would have ruined. He probably would have had to resign at that stage because remember back in the '60s, early '60s, something like that would have destroyed him. Would have destroyed the so-called Camelot and everything, and not only Jack but Robert too. So you look at the way the world was then, and you say, well, who was expendable?
Interesting. Mike, when we come back, let's talk about Frank Sinatra and the Mafia murders. Next up with our guest, Mike Rothmiller, we're going to talk about the life of Frank Sinatra on Coast to Coast. Then we'll take your calls. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie with you, Mike Rothmiller with us, Frank Sinatra and the Mafia murders. Tell us about this one, Mike.
Yes, this is another book just came out, and our information came from a lot of intelligence files, a lot of information we received from people who knew Frank quite well, and others, a lot of them out of Vegas, knew a lot of his going-ons there. So we looked at it and we decided to do it, but we didn't concentrate on, say, a movie career, singing career. What we did is focused on his mob connections, where they started and how they carried him basically throughout his adult life. And that's one of the big things we got into. And we got into his first, for a better term, godfather, who that was, Willie Moriarty, who he met when he was growing up in Hoboken, and he was part of the Genovese family. He took Frank under his wing when Frank was young and started making arrangements for him to sing in various bars and taverns for basically cigarettes and food. And as Frank got a little bit older, they started seeing the potential in him as far as being a teen idol and so forth, as he did turn out. So Willie, along with Lucky Luciano and a couple other guys, they put up $50,000 back then to promote him. And that's what really launched him into becoming a huge teen idol across the United States. And through his entire life, he maintained very close relationships, working relationships with various members of the Mafia.
Including Luciano, right?
Yes, until Lucky passed away. And his main contact was Sam Giancana, who at the time was the godfather of the Chicago outfit, the Chicago Mafia. They were the most powerful group at that stage in the country.
Well, he was Kennedy's connection to Giancana.
That's right. What happened, Frank introduced Judith Exner to Sam Giancana. And through time, not a long time, but through time, she became Sam's girlfriend, and she was also having an affair with JFK at the time when JFK was president. And one interesting aspect about it is that the FBI had a wiretap on Sam's house, on his phone.
In Chicago.
Yes. JFK called from the White House to speak with her. He's chatting with her and so forth. And they end the conversation, and about a day later, J. Edgar Hoover calls Bobby Kennedy and says, I want to talk to you. You've got to come here. It's about your brother. And he runs the tape for him and says, this is your brother talking to this woman named Judith Exner. Do you know who she is? And I kind of know, heard about it. He says, well, do you know where she's at when he's talking to her? And that's when Hoover drops the bomb on him and says, well, she's at Sam Giancana's house because that's her boyfriend, one of them, and your brother's calling her at Sam Giancana's house. At that stage...
And Bobby didn't know about this?
He didn't know about it until Hoover dropped it on him. Oh, and so at that stage, Hoover knew he would never be fired. He could take him down. But beyond Giancana, as a lot of people know, that Sam got involved with the plot to assassinate Castro, along with Robert Mayhew, who was working for Howard Hughes then, and
Santos,
Guy Roselli, and so forth.
Trafficante, and all those people.
Yes, exactly. And it was something that he was. I don't think they were really going to try to do it, but I thought they were doing it probably from all the intelligence I read that they were going along to help the CIA, or at least give the impression they were helping them to keep the FBI off their back. So all of this came about through time with Frank, and Frank was very close over the years to two brothers, the Fischetti brothers, Charles and Rocco. They were Al Capone's cousins, and so they grew up working for Al Capone, and they were in Chicago and Detroit area, moving around there, and Frank got extremely close to them. When he would travel back to that area, he would stay at their house many, many times, and when he needed a favor, a lot of times he would call them as opposed to calling Sam Giancana. And over the years, he got so close that he was not afraid of being photographed with them, even though most people knew, especially within the media, that these guys were in the mob. And Frank would go to dinner with them in Chicago and so forth, not a care about being photographed with them. When Sam basically put up a lot of money for the Cal Naval Lodge up at Lake Tahoe with Frank, he would go up there, he would visit, but he was never staying under his real name, Sam Giancana, but also they would bring in a lot of prostitutes to entertain their friends and foe alike, and some of the rooms, through intelligence we learned that they were bugged, and that information, the wiretaps out of some of the rooms were being used by the mafia to extort people and to keep people in line. So Frank was involved in that, and he lost his gaming license because of his affiliation with the mob, the first gaming license.
That's right.
As time went by, Frank wanted to be reinstated with the Gaming Commission because he was offered a position to be the director of entertainment and one of the big resorts, and so he was trying to get it. And to get it, he went to the CIA and volunteered to work for them as an informant. He could travel the world, he said. He could meet with royalty and so forth and gather any information they wanted. Well, the CIA turned him down. And the reason they turned him down was they thought he was going to be too much of a loose cannon, and there's a possibility that he would start saying things that, hey, I'm secretly working for the CIA and so forth. They were already working with Sam Giancana and Roselli and some other mob guys. That's the last thing they wanted to have broadcast out by Frank, because Frank was kind of a loose cannon.
Of course, Roselli ended up in an oil drum, didn't he, in pieces?
Yes, he did. Yeah, the SS Roselli, as it was called.
Absolutely. Well, the movie The Godfather, Mike,
yes,
that Mario Puzo wrote, he always denied it, but he wrote in a character named Johnny Fontaine.
He certainly did.
Who owed his allegiance to singing to the Corleone family.
Yes.
And everybody thinks it was based on Frank Sinatra. What do you think?
I think they're right.
Yeah.
You know, he may have denied it all along, but all of the pieces fit in the puzzle because of Frank's background with the mob guys, how they supported him, how they got him various jobs within the movie industry and so forth. It all fits, except there was no horse's head in anybody's bed, but there was some very, very scary threats made to people if they didn't put Frank in the movies and so forth.
And Frank always denied it publicly, didn't he?
Sure. He did, but he denied everything in his mob connection, but yet he was with these guys many, many times, and he would say there's one photograph that's been around for a while where he's with, like 7 or 8 guys, and they're all from the New York area mob guys. And he said, well, they just came to see a show, and I took a picture with them. Well, that's not true because he was always running around with the Fischetti brothers, and then when he was going to Vegas, a lot after a guy named Tony Spilotro went there, Tony the Ant, and he was basically he was a hitman for the Chicago mob, and he was kind of looking out for things for them in Vegas. And his brother was with him a lot, Michael Spilotro, and there were, oh my goodness, probably 25, 30 photos at different times of Frank with Mike Spilotro in Vegas, doing different things, going to shows, hanging out together. He knew exactly who Mike Spilotro was. He knew who Tony Spilotro was, yet he wasn't concerned about being photographed with them in public, which is really quite amazing when you think about it. But he went on with his career. He wasn't a made man in the mafia, but as I was saying in the book, the mob made him into what he was.
They brought him under their wing, didn't they?
Absolutely, they did. Starting when he was young, they took him under their wing. They brought him up. They promoted him. They twisted arms of some people, made threats to have them place him in different venues and also to be in movies and so forth and cut record deals. So they were really a strong force behind him. And the reason being because they saw money. They were making
right. I mean, he was a talented guy. There's no doubt about that.
No, absolutely. And he did a lot of charity work, too. That was fine. But he basically had a fallout with JFK. And you probably know about that.
Oh, yeah. He supported JFK. He did that song for him, High Hopes, for the campaign.
And JFK was supposed to come down and stay at his Palm Springs house, so he had a lot of remodeling done for that. And
he built a helicopter pad and everything.
Yes, and at the last minute, Bobby called Peter Lawford and said, hey, call Frank and tell him that the president's not coming. It was because of the mob connections were coming out about Sinatra.
Well, and Joe Sr. told his son John, don't do this.
Yes.
He's got bad connections.
Yes. And so at that stage, Frank basically broke it off with them. Peter Lawford took the heat. And I think that's what really damaged Peter Lawford, one,
with Frank.
Career.
Yeah.
Yes, with Frank, but also after the Marilyn situation and now this, I think that just took Peter over the side, got into drugs and alcohol just to try to numb himself to what he knew.
You get a kick out of this. I ran into Al Pacino yesterday and sent his table over some drinks, and he told the waiter they don't drink alcohol, but do you mind if we can switch these into non-alcoholic drinks? And I went, sure, and he waved his glass to me and the thumbs up and stuff like that and said, thank you. Really nice guy. But I was the last reporter, Mike, to talk to Jimmy Hoffa back in May of 1975.
Uh-huh.
He disappeared in 77.
Yes.
But why do you think Sam Giancana was rubbed out?
Well, what most of the people in intelligence thought at the time is that he was subpoenaed and he was going to maybe start talking about the Castro assassination plot. And it was kind of
or Kennedy.
Yes. But about that they were looking at him. Primarily, he was going to testify about that, and he was worried if he didn't testify, he'd be granted immunity and he'd be put in a prison cell for good. And it was, like I said, a mixed bag with the intelligence field. Some thought that was it, and others thought it was just far larger than that it was an issue with the mob itself. He was getting too much, if you want to say, press, negative press, and they took him out. I don't know what happened regarding that, and I don't think anybody does, and nobody ever will learn. But the word came down that it was probably Tony Spilotro who killed him in his house because he knew Tony well.
Whoever killed him, he knew who that person was.
Oh, absolutely, because he got right up behind him when he's
cooking,
frying up some sausages exactly in the basement and shoots him. And Tony had a way, he didn't live too far from him at the time he had a place, and he could get to his house without being seen by going through other people's yards and so forth. And that's what intelligence believes happened. And also the curious thing was that Chicago PD was supposed to have some security people at his house out front watching. And what I was told in intelligence is that for some reason, about a half hour before they believe he was killed, they left.
That's interesting.
You know,
what are the odds of that happening?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think they went to get something to eat or come back, you know, but it was just interesting. And so, like I said, some of them believed it was.
And if they did, there were supposed to be 2 replacements.
You bet.
To come in for them.
Yeah, and a lot of the people, the intelligence going around, was that the CIA was involved with taking out Sam Giancana, because then Roselli was taken out not long after that. And where that ends up, I don't think we'll ever know, but there was a lot of intelligence pointing fingers back at the CIA that they were involved in it.
None of this ever hurt Frank's career, really, did it?
No, it really didn't hurt it. He was interesting, too, in the fact that you remember a guy named Bugsy Siegel.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, well, when Bugsy...
Flamingo.
Yeah, exactly. When Bugsy would come in Hollywood, he was there a lot. And
he got killed in Beverly Hills.
Yes, he did. If Frank and mainly like Phil Silvers were friends, and if they're in a restaurant and Bugsy would come in, they would both stand up and basically pay homage to him. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Siegel, how are you tonight?
Mm-hmm.
I hope everything's well. And then they'd go on, and then they would brag to some of their friends about Bugsy Siegel, and they would want to know, say, gee, what do you think? How many people has he killed? How does he prefer killing them, and so forth? But Frank was fascinated with that. He was infatuated with Bugsy Siegel. And it appears that throughout his life, his adult life with the mob, he was living their lives vicariously. He thought he was a tough guy and a mob guy, and he enjoyed that because it put some fear into some people. And there's one example when Frank was in Vegas. He was at one of the hotels, and he just got drunk and obnoxious, and he got to an verbal location with one of the pit bosses. So Frank was moved out.
Is that where the pit boss knocked his teeth out?
No, this was a different one. And so the pit boss, they escort him out, get him out of there. Well, Frank starts calling some long as this guy, you got to take care of him. He embarrassed me, blah, blah, blah. He wanted him hit. And they said, don't worry, we'll take care of this. Well, what they did, they moved the guy up to Reno very quickly.
Right, instead of killing him.
And Frank thought they killed him. And so he was very appreciative of that. Just wonderful, that you did this. Another major issue we have in the book is when his son was kidnapped, Frank Jr.
Which a lot of people thought he arranged himself for publicity, but that wasn't the case.
Yes. A lot of people, and I think a lot of people would argue today that's exactly what it was. But the interesting aspect was when Frank found out that his son was kidnapped. Now, normally the average person would say, well, I would call the police or the FBI, right? Well, his first calls do not go to the FBI or the police. The first call went to Sam Giancana and told him what happened. He said, hey, I learned my son's been kidnapped. Well, they all thought, well, these are probably two or three mob guys from the West Coast that did this. They're the only ones that would be stupid enough to do something like that. And so Sam says, well, let me look into it. And Frank's next call goes to Jimmy the Weasel Fradiano, who was in L.A. at the time, and same thing. And then there were conversations after that with Giancana speaking with the Weasel. And he goes out, the Weasel does, starts looking for people who he thinks might be involved. Well, the intelligence demonstrated that he did grab some guys that he knew, not all together, but one at a time. He took them out. He did his own interrogation of them, thinking they may have been involved. and those people have never been seen since.
Interesting. We're going to come back and take calls with you next, Mike, on Coast to Coast AM. Next hour, Samuel Chong joins us to talk about ET technology on Coast to Coast. Make sure you're part of the program, of course. And we'll be back to take final calls with Mike Rothmiller in just a moment as we talked about Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe. And welcome back. George Norrie with you, Mike Rothmiller with us. Mike, before we take calls here, where do we get your books, Frank Sinatra and Bombshell?
The best place, the easiest place is go to Amazon.com.
Simple as that. Quick and efficient, huh?
Yes.
All right, very good. And what's your next project, by the way?
That's what we're deciding now. I've been speaking with our publisher about that, and it'll be along the same lines, but it will be another major VIP that we have a lot of intelligence on.
Good for you. Let's go to the phones. Joe, Long Island, New York, east of the Rockies. Hey, Joseph, go ahead.
Great topics. On Frank Sinatra, he described the mobsters as the boys or the syndicate, never referring to them as the Cosa Nostra or the mafia, but neither did J. Edgar Hoover didn't admit to a mafia until later, and apparently might have been getting tips from them at the track. So that's interesting. But I also wanted to ask you about the openness of Cuba, where it seemed up until Castro that anybody could go there, just a common citizen. What might have been going on there? And also, did Frank have, brief affairs with either Judy Garland or Elizabeth Taylor, supposedly? And he did hang out a little bit, I believe, with Natalie Wood.
And you were an investigator of Natalie Wood's disappearance, weren't you, Mike?
Yeah, exactly. When I was working OCID, once she drowned, the chief of police wanted us to investigate, even though it wasn't our jurisdiction, it was the L.A. sheriffs. And so I was involved with that and a couple other guys who did a brief investigation into it. But we had to be very careful because the chief of police, Daryl Gates, did not want the sheriff of L.A. County to know that we were stepping into his turf. And it was just a matter of we didn't come up with anything that would demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that she was killed.
Right.
Beyond drowning.
I think she fell over the boat and they were
exactly.
too drunk and didn't even know she was off.
Exactly. And it was cold. The water's cold. She was wearing a heavy coat.
And didn't know how to swim.
That's the topper, yes. And so when you combine all of that, it looked like just a tragic accident.
In terms of Sinatra, he really never said anything about the mafia, did he?
No, because by defending them or acknowledging them in any fashion, people start saying, well, why are you defending them? How do you know about them? Which a lot of people already knew, but as the gentleman asked, that even Hoover was denying organized crime, the mafia, La Cosa Nostra, the syndicate, whatever you want to call it. He was denying that until he could not deny it any longer. But he mentioned in his question there about him, J. Edgar Hoover, going to the track. Well, most people don't know that Hoover would go out to Del Mar near San Diego, the racetrack, during the season. He would come out for a day or two, and he'd generally come along with Clyde Tolson.
And he'd get tips.
He would get tips. And it was interesting because if he bet, well, he was betting, and if he won, they'd pay him. If he lost, they would still pay him. Everything was comped, as you would expect. Even the accommodations were the same, but he never lost the dollar there. They would reimburse him, and he never turned it down.
Well, that was at the Frank Sinatra story where Howard Hughes owned one of the casinos at the time. I think it might have been the Sands. And he and Frank both liked Ava Gardner.
Yes.
And so Howard Hughes cut off Frank's line of credit. So Frank's playing blackjack, thinking he's got all this money to play with. And he asks publicly in front of everybody, hey, I need another $20,000. And the pit boss said, Frank, you've been cut off. and the guy got into a fight with the pit boss, and that's where the pit boss knocked out his teeth.
Yes. Yeah, there were a lot of information we have on Howard Hughes, too, especially when he was in Vegas. I've interviewed a lot of people that were his, if you want to say, aides, assistants at the time, and he's really a very, very interesting person. And also a funny little story about Frank. When he was being subpoenaed in L.A., he was dodging the subpoena. So he's hiding out at his house in Palm Springs. Well, LAPD intelligence gets the job of hunting him down and serving the subpoena on him. So they track him down. They know he's in Palm Springs. They go down there, and they're going from various bars that he hung out with at and restaurants. And, hey, it's Frank. And, oh, he just left. So while they're there, they happen to spot this policewoman they knew from LAPD, a very attractive policewoman. So they pull her aside and say, listen, we're looking for Frank, and when we find him, we're going to serve a subpoena on him. Would you come with us? Because it's more likely he wouldn't put his guard up if he saw a woman coming at him, as he would two guys. So they go to Frank's house, and it's late at night, and the guy from OCID picks the lock on the front door, even though he says the door was probably unlocked. I think he picked the lock.
Which is illegal, right?
Yeah, but, this is OCID then, the gangster squad.
They do anything they wanted.
You bet. There are no rules for them. And they go into his house, and they walk down the hallway, and they hear a guy snoring in one bedroom. So they go in there, and they stand over, they look at the guy. He's bald, and there's a set of false teeth sitting on the nightstand along with the toupee.
It was Frank?
Well, yeah, they didn't realize it. So they go, they look and say, "Oh, that's some old guy. That's not him."
Well, I didn't know he didn't have his own teeth.
Yeah, so they go to the next bedroom, and there's a gal in there. So they wake her up, and they ask, "Where's Sinatra?" She goes, "Well, he's right across the hall there." That's where they came from. So they go in there, they shake him and wake him up and hand him a subpoena.
Jeez.
It's just one of those stories. And I know it's true because the guy who was working the gangster squad, I know his son very well, who's a retired cop. And he told me the story, and I knew that from when I was working in the OCID. So there's a lot of interesting things about Frank that people don't know, but we got tons of that information in the book.
Let's go to Thomas in La Jolla, California. Hey, Tom, go ahead.
Hi, George. Thank you for accepting my call.
Sure.
Mike, great information that you're bringing to the table. I wanted to ask about the movie The Manchurian Candidate. And after the early 60s, The Manchurian Candidate came out, Frank Sinatra bought the rights to the entire movie. And later in his life, he knew he was going to die. This is the early 1990s. He gave an assignment to his daughter, Tina Sinatra, and he said, look, I'm going to die, but I own the rights to the Manchurian Candidate. I'm giving you an assignment. I want you to take this movie and remake it. And he goes, get the best director, the best actors, the best screenwriters, etc., best production team, and do a remake of The Manchurian Candidate. I had seen a number of interviews. This is about 14 years ago on YouTube. And then I was told by a friend, they said, oh, by the way, Thomas, all of those interviews are on the DVD of The Manchurian Candidate remake. There's an interview with Tina Sinatra. There's an interview with Frank Sinatra himself, and then plus the stars, Denzel Washington, Meryl Streep, one of the script writers who had investigated trauma-based mind control. But it was obvious that Frank Sinatra was interested in trauma-based mind control, so interested that he wanted this movie remade. when you watch the movie on the DVD, you see the Paramount logo, and then you see Tina Sinatra's logo for movie production company. And so anyway, she came out about 6 years after Frank Sinatra died with the remake of The Manchurian Candidate. So I was wondering, what was his fascination with The Manchurian Candidate, with trauma-based mind control? And when you see the interview with Frank Sinatra on the DVD, he's not talking about North Korea or Russia or China. He's just saying that trauma-based mind control exists. So I was wondering if you would comment on that, if you know anything about that. And all the interviews are on the DVD.
Well, he starred in the 62 movie, too, didn't he? Go ahead, Mike.
As far as I know. Yeah, I have not seen the DVD that you're speaking of, though, the remake. But I could understand him being very interested in something like that, just from his own background. Being hooked up to the mob, he saw a lot of secrets. He wanted to work with the CIA, so I could see how he would have an interest in that. And possibly it could have been that he just wanted to leave that to his family as an inheritance and garner the funds that movie would bring in.
Was Dean Martin still around when you were with the LAPD?
Yes.
He was a great talent, too.
Yes. Matter of fact, we talk about Dean Martin in the book, too, but there are a lot of those people. Unfortunately, they're all gone now, but it's just an interesting group of people that were around Frank in the entertainment world and in the mob world.
Paul, Jersey City, New Jersey. Hey, Paul, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi there.
A pleasure to listen to this program because, my gosh, I was a grown man at the time. I remember very well all of this. And I have some questions I would like to ask. But first, I want to ask you, George, if you can feature some bumper music by another singer from Hoboken, a contemporary of Frank Sinatra, and he wanted absolutely nothing to do with the mafia. And that was Jimmy Rosselli. Jimmy Rosselli was also called.
If we have any of his music around, I'll look into it. But go ahead with your question. We only had a couple minutes left.
Okay, I'll make this as fast as I can. At the time, is there anything in your book about Estes Kefauver? He was he died the same year as John F. Kennedy, by the way.
Yeah,
I think he died in August of '63.
The Kefauver hearings?
Kefauver Crime Commission. One of the things he was doing was investigating the mafia being involved with interstate commerce. But before he went anywhere with it, now this was a story I read in a magazine at the time. I forget what magazine it was now. But they claim that J. Edgar Hoover took Kefauver aside and showed him surveillance photos that they had of him with another woman, not his wife. And after that, Kefauver basically
did whatever he said.
Stopped doing anything, and later that year died. So I wanted to know if there's any mention in your book about Estes Kefauver.
Yeah, he died a few months before Kennedy did.
Yes, yeah. We didn't really get into a lot about that aspect of Sinatra's life, but Kefauver and anybody on the East Coast, especially within the Senate or within Congress or within the White House, Hoover would have had people on them to surveil them at various times, to wiretap them and so forth. So it's not a surprise if there's a huge file still at FBI headquarters on Kefauver and other people from that time frame.
Hoover kept his job because he kept the dossier on everybody else, right?
Oh, yes, and he had his own private files. I've got some of the documents out of his personal file after he died, and a lot of people, they're unaware of the fact that he wrote a letter to Martin Luther King pretending that he was a black guy, urging him to commit suicide.
Wow.
Hoover did that.
Jeez. What a notorious guy he was.
Yeah, he was very notorious, but he was getting a lot of money from various people, and he wielded, as you know, loads and loads of power in Washington, D.C. and within the country.
Did you ever meet Sammy Davis Jr.?
I met him once.
Nice guy, wasn't he?
Yes, he was very friendly. Same thing out there, old Rat Pack. Beyond when I interviewed Peter Lawford, I met Joey Bishop at the Balboa Bay Club in Newport Beach.
You met them all?
But not all of them, but pretty close to it, yeah.
Well, Michael, you stay as one of our resources and stay in touch with us whenever you want, okay?
Certainly, and thank you.
And good luck with the books, folks, available at Amazon, Bombshell, and Frank Sinatra. They're great books with the yellow print and everything else, so definitely take advantage of it. Up next, we're going to talk a little bit about ET technology and knowledge that inspires scientists and engineers that can benefit all of us in just a moment on Coast to Coast. How extensive is extraterrestrial technology? And what about the knowledge that some scientists and engineers might possess? In a moment, Samuel Chong back with us. We'll talk about all of that and later on take your calls on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Samuel Chong back with us, certified court interpreter and Chinese translator. He has interpreted a number of books from Prophecy, the Revelation of H.M. versus Stuck, and he has taken these messages in order to give people hope and help promote a better world through his scholarship. Samuel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again, George.
My pleasure. What got you involved in these interpretations of these books?
Well, I was always fascinated by space and the paranormal when I was young. I thought if the ETs could contact us and we can just learn from them to get as much information as possible about technologies and the mysteries of the paranormal so that we can just solve all the mysteries. And so I stumbled upon this book, Thiaoouba Prophecy and 334 Lies, and I thought it's a good idea to have them translated into Chinese and English so that more people can read them. So that got me into translating these two books into Chinese and also from German to English.
How old are these books, Samuel?
Well, the first book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, it was written in 1989 and got published in English in Australia in 1993. And the second book, 334 Lies, it was originally published in German in 2001, and then I had it translated into English just last year.
So relatively new books.
Yes, relatively new books, yes. And
the authors of them, they are where?
Well, Thiaoouba Prophecy was written by Michel Desmarquet. He was a French-Australian who passed away 4 years ago. And the second book, the autobiography about the highest chair of the Illuminati, he actually disappeared right after he finished writing this book. So no one knows where he is at right now.
And this ET technology and knowledge, tell me where you got your information from these books or elsewhere?
From this book, actually specifically from the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, because it contains so much information that we can actually verify.
Let's talk about some of the technology that they might possess. And do we have any of it now?
Well, interestingly enough, they revealed some technologies that every one of us can incorporate and utilize for our own benefit. But there are also other technologies that need specific kind of research and development in order to incorporate the technologies. But there's something that we can actually do to help us, like to improve our health and also well-being.
And you're a staunch believer in both, aren't you?
Yes, I do. I believe that the information contained in this book can really benefit us spiritually and also materially.
Well, with Samuel Chong, his websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. ET technology, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means that the technologies that we haven't been able to develop or commercialize or promote it to a wide spread audience. There are certain ET technologies that are withheld by certain group of people, for example, the military or special interest groups, that people like us haven't been able to really take advantage of them. But I think certain technologies, as written in this book, should be promoted on wider scale.
Now, the ET propulsion systems, what do you think it is? I mean, how are they able to travel such vast differences? They're doing something different that we obviously can't do.
That's right. They're able to travel a long distance in such a short time because, according to this book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, they first travel at a speed faster than the speed of light, a few times faster than the speed of light, into deep space. And then in deep space, they used what they call transubstantiation or teleportation to immediately transfer themselves or teleport themselves into another location in deep space. And then from that location, they travel again at a few times faster than the speed of light to reach their destination, their own planet.
Are they constantly in touch with you, Samuel?
No, because I actually would like them to only help me when it is absolutely necessary, because I really want to take full advantage of my lifetime to really grow and to respond to my life challenges, because that's the best way to learn. When you are given a meal or when you're given the solutions to a puzzle or a problem, that's probably not the best way to learn or to remember. I really want to learn it on my own ways without their intervention.
A couple areas on this planet that have been fascinating to all of us, the Great Pyramids of Giza and the Bermuda Triangle area. You've looked at both of these through the eyes of ETs, haven't you?
That's right. I was very curious about the Great Pyramid and the Bermuda Triangle, so this book provides the answers. And regarding the Great Pyramid, it really resonates to me that it's actually a tool or energy center that captures cosmic energy and also terrestrial energies, so that people who use the Great Pyramid correctly could actually communicate with ETs on other planets, and also to explore parallel universe. And also, like according to this book, the ancient Egyptians also used the Great Pyramid correctly to make rains and to moderate weather. And I found that to be very interesting because there are scientists, modern scientists, that also show that the Great Pyramid is an energy center that can actually do a lot of wonderful things. And they also used what they call organ energy to make rain and to moderate weather.
Modern scientists are using that now, so they picked that up from that kind of technology.
Exactly. So that's very interesting.
It really is. They ionize the clouds with it, don't they?
That's right. That's actually done by scientists from the University of Reading in the UK, and they did a lot of experiments and successfully.
And what do you think the Bermuda Triangle is, Samuel?
Well, according to the advanced, beautiful ETs from Thiaoouba, the Bermuda Triangle is actually entry to a warp or a portal to a parallel universe. So people, ships, or planes that are near that area got sucked into this portal. And I think it's really interesting because it can actually explain a lot of the cases, the missing 411 cases by David Paulides, in which
people just disappear.
They just mysteriously vanish in national parks. I mean, it's so strange that they disappear in clustered areas. And also the rescue dogs don't pick up any scent. And also, like people in a group, just like one person within this line of people just suddenly vanish.
And you don't hear them scream or anything. They're just gone.
Right. And corpses actually are found in inaccessible places. And also there are cases in which when the corpses are found, they found that they walked to their bones. So this actually matches the account of Michel Desmarquet, who actually went inside of the parallel universe and actually saw what went on inside of everything.
Samuel, have you been aboard an ET craft?
No, I have not, but I'd love to when I have the chance.
Would you go if they asked you?
Yes, I would definitely go, like Michel did.
What if they didn't bring you back?
Well, I would be very happy because to Michel Desmarquet and to me, the category 9th planet is actually just like a paradise. Everything is so perfect and so loving and so compassionate. And the people there perform all the miracles that's performed by Jesus Christ as documented in the Bible. So they could do everything that Jesus Christ did. And I think that would be a perfect place. I wouldn't want to come back, actually.
You really wouldn't?
I really want to go there, yes.
But you wouldn't matter if you stayed there?
It doesn't really matter because...
I'd miss my family, I think.
Well, Michel Desmarquet thought that he would miss his family, but he didn't. He forgot his family.
No.
And he did. He forgot his family.
Oh, my God.
And actually, he didn't want to come back. They actually didn't tell him that he was coming back, and he felt really, really sad after he was told that he was coming back to Earth.
So he has written this book, Thiaoouba Prophecy.
That's right.
And this is based on his experiences with ETs?
Exactly, and he documented everything that he saw, he witnessed, he heard, or he experienced. So it's a very detailed account of his personal experiences of traveling to this planet called Thiaoouba or Jehovah for 9 days and then came back.
It's too bad we've lost him.
Yes, 4 years ago.
He also wrote about a time machine. Tell me about that.
Well, according to the Thiaoubans, the U.S. government was actually developing a time machine at that time, I think in the late 80s or earlier than that. In the very beginning, through the Philadelphia experiment, when they found that there could be a distortion of time and space when they project a certain wavelength of frequencies into the ships. So they say that the U.S. government, the military, was actually making a mistake. They were actually trying to adapt to the wavelength, which is a mistake. They should have adapted to the vibrations of the Akashic records, which rotates around Earth like at 7 times the speed of light. So people with practice, they can actually go inside of the Akashic records and look at what happened in the past, in history. So this is actually can be done by people who are highly spiritual and who have the power to do so.
It is fascinating how that works, isn't it?
Yeah. But going to the future is another concept. And it's another thing that, well, our actions decide what future is going to be like. So we can actually see certain probabilities that's going to happen in the future, but it's not a fixed projection. We really need to act in order to determine what the future is going to be like exactly.
What's easier, going back into time or going into the future?
Going back in time is much easier than going into the future.
Huh. And you believe that the future depends a lot on consciousness and things like that?
Exactly. And the Thiaoubans, they can only see about 100 years or so to the future. They cannot predict what's going to happen more than 100 years ahead of us.
That's still a long ways out anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, so we really need to get it going and to mend our ways, because actually the book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, It's not a book of prophecy. It's a book of warnings, just like the book of Enoch. When Enoch was told to write a book, and he did so, and he was taken away by Jehovah or God. And a few decades later, Noah was told to build an ark, and Noah was a great grandson of Enoch. Michel Desmarquet, the author of Thiaoouba Prophecy, was also told to write this book. And he said that what Enoch described in the book of Enoch is very similar to what he actually saw on the planet Thiaoouba or Jehovah. And then similarly, you can imagine what's going to happen a few decades later. And I think this is a very kind of a parallel comparison between Enoch and Michel Desmarquet.
Tell us about this anti-gravity technology that you came upon.
Well, according to this book, the Thiaoubans, they're really kind of adept at incorporating anti-gravitational technologies in everything that they do. For example, when they travel within on their planet, they used like a traveling vehicle, which is like a small hand device that neutralizes the what they call cold magnetic forces of their planet. And they say that if you raise your vibrations to a higher level, the vibrations can actually neutralize the gravity of the planet. So similarly, the same technology can be developed on Earth. And actually, I personally think that the government has already developed the anti-gravitational technologies.
Are they using it now, do you think, Samuel?
Yes, in some of the secret government programs, trying to reverse engineering the technologies of the grays, and also trying to get their own advantage from their competitors.
You've seen the videos shot from the USS Nimitz from the jets, right?
Yes, I've seen that, yes.
Tic Tac videos. Is it possible that those craft are ours?
Yes. This is a very interesting question because there are ways to distinguish the crafts that are really ours and also the crafts that are real ETs. One way to distinguish them is that our crafts are actually mostly triangular in shape, and the ET crafts are more like spherical shaped, and they kind of give the people a more kind of comfortable and loving experience, in which our crafts sometimes they try to imitate or project like a scary experience to the people that they abduct. I think the real ETs, they are spiritually developed, in a much more advanced level, that they don't want to invade us at all, or they don't want to cause harm to us, because otherwise they wouldn't be allowed to travel to other planets. Using a similar comparison, like we traveled to the moon about 50 years ago, but we never went back. The reason, according to Michel Desmarquet, is that we were warned off from the moon. We were still fighting against ourselves, like among ourselves. So we are not ready. We were not ready, and we are still not ready to explore the universe, to other planets, because we're just going to pollute other planets. They don't want us to really cause any harm to the inhabitants of other planets, so they would do everything possible to prevent us from, for example, landing on the moon again.
By warding us off the moon, why?
Because, we have a lot of intentions that are not necessarily good for the harmonious, like the universe or other inhabitants on other planets. If we keep fighting against ourselves, that means that we would fight other ETs on other planets. They wouldn't want us to happen. And they would prevent us from going to the moon again or to explore other planets. I mean, even if Elon Musk wants to travel to Mars or maybe to go to another planet, I don't think that's going to happen because the ETs are going to warn us and to prevent us from doing that so successfully. successfully.
Our guest tonight is Samuel Chong, as we are talking about the Thiaoouba Prophecy, the Golden Planet book. It's an incredible story. Would you say that the author of the book, the Michel, was a prophet?
I wouldn't say that because he was actually a landscaper, a farmer in Australia.
Oh, really?
He didn't have a lot of education. He didn't go to college.
Just got visited, I guess, huh?
Right. He got visited, and he didn't know how to type, and he didn't know how to use computer, not to say that he could surf the Internet. He didn't know how to do any of those.
So it's not like he knew a lot about what he was going to be talking about.
That's right. He was just kind of faithfully reporting what he was told and what he saw and experienced. And I met him twice. He was dictating to his Vietnamese niece when he was writing emails to me. I mean, I witnessed how he communicated with other people all through his niece who typed everything for him.
Fascinating. Samuel, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back and chat more on Coast to Coast AM. We'll take calls next hour with Samuel Chong as we talk about the fascination of ET technology. Up next, by the way, we're going to talk about how it can help our health in certain colors, and he'll talk about death and passing and what that all means as well, so get ready for that. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Samuel Chong with us. Samuel, explain once again to people just tuning in what the Thiaoouba Prophecy book is all about.
It's a book written by the author Michel Desmarquet, who in 1987 was taken by this group of beautiful 9-foot-tall, highly advanced ETs and to their planet for 9 days, and then came back. And he was told many of the mysteries and the paranormals on Earth, and also the solutions to our current-day problems. And a fascinating book with a lot of detailed and specific information that the readers can really verify.
How did you come across the book?
Well, I really wanted to unveil all the mysteries of the universe and the paranormal. So I wanted to find that out by receiving such information from ETs that are highly advanced, so that we can actually take the shortcut to not to waste a lot of time do our own research. And I found this book on Amazon, and it has all the answers to my questions.
You stumbled across it like that?
Yes, accidentally.
Well, that's amazing. And it captured your attention, didn't it?
Yes, it really answers all my questions regarding, for example, the stories in the Bible and also ET technologies, and also what we do in life, the purpose of life, is there reincarnation, and how we respond to the challenges that we all face in life. So it's really like a comprehensive book that is answers everything.
Let's talk a little bit about how they have recommended we take care of our physical health. What are some of the ways?
Yes. They emphasize that there are indeed human energy fields of people, that some people can actually see the colors of auras. Some people call that auras. And they kind of can predict what's going to happen to us physically. So it actually shows the changes of colors before the physical symptoms manifest in our physical body. So the way to really see the auras is actually to use the third eye. Some people meditate and be able to develop this kind of ability, and some others just have this kind of natural gift, such as Barbara Brennan, a former NASA scientist. Yes.
Now these colors tell you what?
The colors tell the person's intentions, but also personality, and also a lot of the health conditions. For example, like there's a person, my friend Roger, he can see the colors of auras, and when he sees like there's a grayish area, like around the liver area. So maybe 3 or 4 months later, the physical symptoms would appear that the liver would have some kind of problems. So that's kind of a way to predict what's going to happen. So you can actually make it go away before physical symptoms happen by like healing the to make the colors go back to the normal colors.
Now, do the colors do the healing, or do they just tell you what's good or bad about yourself?
Both. When people see the colors of auras, they can tell whether it's good or bad about you. You can also at the same time incorporate the colors to moderate or maybe to improve the colors of your auras. So this is the importance of color therapy, or some people call it chromotherapy, that was very popular in the 1920s before antibiotics were developed by the pharmaceutical companies. So there are a lot of studies and experiments done by scientists. For example, like just recently in 2016, Harvard Medical School had a research study on the color green to the effects of migraines. It found that the color green or green light actually reduces migraines on the people who participated in the clinical experiment. It is so effective that the people who participated in the experiment requested them to give them the LED green lights free of charge because they really want to use the lights at home to reduce their migraines. So this is the color green. So there are other colors that have other effects on people. I can elaborate on the color pink, which is very interesting. Is that
sure? How does that work?
Yeah. So in the 1980s, San Bernardino County Probation Department did an experiment. They painted the walls into pink color, and they found that the children tend to relax and stop yelling. And so similarly, in 1979, the U.S. Naval Correctional Facility in Seattle, Washington, also did a similar experiment. And they found out that in about 15 minutes after seeing the color pink, the inmates, they actually had a complete cessation of hostile, erratic behavior. And also, there's other interesting implication or application of pink color by a football coach from the University of Iowa by the name of Hayden Fry. He painted the visiting team's locker room in color pink because he knew the color pink could reduce muscle strength by maybe like 30% or so. So he didn't lose any like home gain in many years of coaching at the University of Iowa. So this is a very interesting implication or application of the color pink by a football coach.
What about blue? What does that do?
So blue reduces suicide, as evidenced by experiment they did in London. They painted the Blackfriars Bridge into color blue and found that the suicide rate reduced by multiple times. And color and blue light also has antibacterial, antiviral effects, as shown by a research study by Harvard Medical School.
Interesting.
And this is also the color that they used to disinfect Michel Desmarquet after he went into their spaceship.
Now, what did they teach him about death and passing to the other side?
They say that there's reincarnation, and they actually showed Michel Desmarquet his past 80 lives. Like life is actually a learning process in which we accumulate spiritual lessons in each lifetime. By experimenting or experiencing pain, suffering, or happiness, we accumulate this kind of lessons that we send to our higher self. And when a person dies, the astral body of the person leaves a physical body, taking away all the spiritual lessons learned in the lifetime. It's a very interesting experience. Very interesting phenomenon is that after a person dies, it goes through a life review process in which the person reveals how he or she did in his lifetime. Like he could feel all the things he did himself or onto others. He would be able to feel how others felt when he or she acted in a certain way. So, and then the person would evaluate him or herself, how he or she did in the lifetime, and then decide whether to reincarnate and what kind of families to be reincarnated to. So this is the purpose of life. So there's nothing to be afraid of death. And when our family members pass away, if they did well in their lifetime, fulfilling their life mission or purpose, then there's nothing to be worried about, because their spirits or their souls are always with us, and they remain forever in the universe.
Yeah, what do they say about the souls, Samuel?
They say that the souls are really, in their words, like higher selves that elevate or move up to the ladder by purifying the experiences. What they mean by that is that we experienced everything in our lifetimes on Earth, but we need to learn to elevate ourselves more spiritually in order to have the souls purified so that we can move up to a higher category of planet. There are a total of 9 different categories of planets in the universe. We, on Earth, are living on Category 1 planet. They, the Thiaoubans, are on Category 9 planet, which is the highest category in the universe.
Now, with some of these reincarnated people, they strongly believe that happens, don't they?
Yes. In fact, there are a lot of scientists and psychologists that show that reincarnation actually exists. For example, Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Ian Stevenson, and even some of the families that have babies born that have memories from the 9/11 event. They remember what happened on that day, like how they died. So this is actually evidence of reincarnation. The reason that the Bible doesn't really talk about it is that it's really removed by the Catholic Church councils. The book Thiaoouba Prophecy specifically named the 4 different church council meetings that intentionally removed certain things from the Bible, the ancient scriptures, original scriptures in the Bible.
Fascinating work, to be sure. Let's talk about the financial challenges facing the planet. They even address that, don't they?
Well, they did. They say that there's a small group of financiers that are controlling everything behind the scenes. What we see, the politicians fighting against each other, Republicans, Democrats, they're actually just for shows. They're just puppets controlled by this small group of financiers. So we really need to look at what's really going on behind everything. We need to wake up and not to be really influenced by the media. We need to be able to have more independent thinkings and to look at everything behind the scenes. They say actually Michel Desmarquet told me that there are 12 families in the world that are really doing everything behind the scenes.
Fascinating indeed. And now you say that there are dangers to planet Earth, that there are various things that they've warned us about. What were they?
They warned us about the 4 different things. The first, number 1, the most dangerous thing on Earth is money.
Money, really?
Yes.
Dangerous?
See,
I guess in the
money.
wrong hands it can be, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there are natural ways to cure certain diseases, but the pharmaceutical companies cannot make money out of them. They cannot patent those natural ways to cure certain diseases. And also the petroleum companies, they want to suppress the clean technologies, the real technologies, such as the water-based engines. And also, like, if they cannot make money, if the government cannot collect the taxes, then they wouldn't encourage people to use this kind of free and clean energy. So everything revolves around money.
Everything does, doesn't it?
Yes.
What else?
And the second most dangerous thing on earth would be the politicians. And
that may be true.
Yeah, unfortunately. And the third would be journalists and drugs.
Really? They put those two together in that category?
Yeah, I don't know why, but they did. They say journalists seek for sensational news, and they kind of influence people's psyche or people's mind, very, very interesting way. I mean, like they tend to focus on the news that cause a lot of turmoil in people's mind, like the killings, the murders, and also suicides and the deaths. And they should instead focus more on the good news, the news that can motivate people, can really help people to be more compassionate, more loving people.
That's fascinating, to be sure. And what about the last one?
The last one would be religions. They say that religions
really?
are actually...
Be careful there, Sam.
They're actually curses on earth. Yeah. So they say, like, religion is really different from spirituality. We should grow and elevate our spiritual development, but religions tend to distort the original intentions of the spiritual masters that happened on earth. And, for example, the religious clergy, they try to be like agents between us and God. They say that when God created human beings, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each one of us. So we are part of God, and God is part of us. So when we try to communicate with God, we should actually focus on communicating within ourselves, like look inside our hearts for answers, because the kingdom of God is within you. And we should not depend or rely on religious leaders or pastors or the clergy, because we can just communicate with God directly. That's more effective, more efficient in doing so.
How important is meditation with all of this, Sam?
Meditation is actually extremely important according to the Thiaoubans, because that's actually one of the best ways to communicate with your higher self, which is part of God, the creator, the source, or the great ether. By meditating, you can actually calm your mind, and so that way you can really communicate more effectively with your soul or your higher self. And they actually encourage people to do that daily. And when Michel Desmarquet was on their planet, he saw the Thiaoubans, the Jehovah's, meditate most of their times. He found it fascinating.
It does work, Sam. We're going to come back and take an hour of phone calls with you next on Coast to Coast. Well, this is the interactive hour where we take your calls. Samuel Chong with us as we talk about ET technologies. Jump aboard and ask a question. Welcome back, Samuel Chong with us. Samuel, do you know how to levitate by any chance?
Well, I know how to do that theoretically, but I haven't really practiced it yet because it takes a lot of energy and efforts to do so. The way to do that is actually to meditate and concentrate in a way. And I know people personally who could do that when they were young. A friend of mine who is a Chinese Qigong master, and she actually was able to do that when she was young, when her energy level was high, but she cannot do it now. And actually, I also saw there's a film shot by a magician called Dan White, White, that when he visited a monk in Nepal, he filmed how the monk levitated himself. He couldn't figure out how he did it, but I think there are still some people on Earth who could do that just by meditation and also concentration.
What about secret societies? What does the book say about them?
Well, the book 334 Lies is an autobiography of the highest chair of the Illuminati. The 41st degree is actually the highest degree of the Illuminati. It used to be 39th degree, and some people they interact with the lower degree members. But I think if they really want to get to know the heart of the secret societies, they should only read two books. One is the 334 Lies, and then the other book is Thiaoouba Prophecy. Before I translated the book, I didn't really believe in any of the secret societies. I thought those were just conspiracy theories and people's imagination. I really took none of it. But after, I was searching for ways to see auras, I found this book, 334 Lies. And they were talking about, forum, that this German book that showed people how they were able to see auras, and also to perform other supernatural abilities. So the gist of the book tells the history and the story of how that one person from a rural part of Germany rose up to the ladder, became the highest degree member of the Illuminati. And it talks about all the rituals, and some of the scenes are really graphic and torture scenes, and that are really only for adults. But it shows that how they're able to use a special form of astrology to predict what's going to happen to a person or to a certain group of people. They're able to calculate the positions of planets in an instant second. They're also able to perform other techniques such as mind control, and also how they influence certain politicians, and how the structure of the Illuminati is. For example, it says that the headquarters in North America was actually located in New York, and the headquarters in Germany was actually in a small city in Germany, and it gives a lot of specific details, but it really doesn't name any names because it would put the author in danger.
Why the title, 334 Lies?
Yes, 334. There's also a symbol of thousands lies. So, but if people search 334 Lies on Amazon, they can find the book.
But I mean, why that title?
Well, it's a mystery. I don't really know. Being the translator myself, I don't really know. They have a very unique way of predicting certain things through numerology. So every number has a meaning, and I guess 334,000 has a specific meaning that waiting to be deciphered.
All right, let's go to the phones. Let's start it off by going to David, truck driving in Illinois. No snow yet, David, out there?
Howdy. Thank you for taking my call.
How's the driving? No snow yet?
Nope, no snow. It looks like it's cloudy, but I looked at the forecast before I took off. It didn't call for any snow tonight, but I'm running 94 and 90 all the way out to Washington. So, yeah, I'll probably run into it.
Well, be careful. Go ahead.
All right, well, I want to make a couple points that I disagree, but at the same time, I agree with your guest.
Okay.
I didn't catch his name.
Samuel.
Pardon me?
Samuel.
Daniel.
Samuel.
Okay.
Samuel.
Well,
Sam.
Samuel. Okay, I'm sorry. First of all, I was putting fuel on the truck, getting the truck washed and so forth, so I missed part of it, but I heard him say they took reincarnation out of the Bible. No, they didn't. If we listen to everything that the scriptures say, yes, it does. Now, God said the covenant was good for 1,000 generations. We go to Psalm 90, we listen to how it talks about we live 70 to 80 years, some live a little bit longer, then we die and we fly away. This is where we go up to the holy mountains. It's talked about in Ezekiel 40 through 46. It talks several spots about the regeneration of the Son of Man. Then it talks about Matthew 7:12. Do unto other men as you would want other men to do unto you. What you reap in this life is what will be done to you in your next life. It's a lesson for our souls. Now, where he was talking about God that dwells in everybody, that's what makes all of us part of the Son of God, because you listen to Colossians 1, we know, well, it's talked about in Corinthians where it talks about everybody is the temple of God. Then you go to Colossians 1, the blood of Jesus, which is in Jesus, the Son of is invisible in the image of the invisible God, which makes everybody the Son of God that can be seen, regardless of race, color, nationalism, size, or shape. Doesn't matter. We all are part of one Son of God.
Want to react to that, Sam?
I totally agree with you, and I hope all Christians believe the same way that you believe. Unfortunately, there are a lot of fundamentalist Christians and evangelicals that still deny the concept of reincarnation. And also, the book Thiaoouba Prophecy actually talks about how in ancient times the ETs intervened in our lives as documented in the ancient scriptures in the Bible. For example, the destruction of the Sodom and Gomorrah, leading Moses out of Egypt, leading Hebrews out of Egypt by Moses and parting the sea of reeds, was actually an intervention by the ETs, according to the book Thiaoouba Prophecy. It also explains why the Bible doesn't have any records of Jesus Christ performing any miracles before the age of 30, and why there's a tomb of Jesus Christ in Shingo Village, Japan, with specific verifiable facts that are so detailed that people can look it up on the internet or by visiting Shingo Village, Japan. So I totally agree with you. And this book explains how the stories in the Bible came about and how the ETs, this group of ETs, the Thiaoubans or Jehovahans, intervened in our ancient past, trying to help us to the right path of spiritual growth.
Let's go west of the Rockies. Gina Maria with us in the state of Washington. Hi, Gina Maria.
Hello. Love and peace and healing, and God bless to everyone and everything everywhere.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I wanted to tell you about 3 short experiences and how it all combines to possibly an ET technology, and ask him a question.
Sure.
So when I was 4 years old, I heard a sound, and I went to the window. I woke up, went to the window, and saw blackness with colors and shapes. And I heard the sound. And the sound is what's the important part of this, because somehow, I knew this was a UFO experience. And so I memorized the sound at 4 years old, and all those years told people about the sound throughout the years. And when I was about 25 years old, I heard the sound again on TV. There were these people that had seen a UFO and heard the sound it made, and they didn't have a video camera, so they audio taped the sound. Then they got a permit and these huge speakers, and on this show they were trying to transmit the sound to outer space to get a hold of the UFO. And when I heard the sound, I knew it was the same sound that I'd been telling everybody about since I was 4 years old. The next time I heard it was in early 2020, when they had actually in November of 2019, and then, in 2020, they produced the sound to us for us to hear, which is a form of gravitational waves. And I believe that the gravitational waves were the UFO's propulsion system of the UFO that I heard when I was 4 years old and had that experience. And I'm wondering if he has ever heard this before. And one more thing, I levitated when I was about 5 years old down a flight of stairs in front of these little girls, and the little girls ran away screaming and upset and never talked to me again. And from then on, it was like something in my soul said, "Oh, you're not supposed to do that." And I have not done it since.
So what's your question, though, for Sam?
My question was, has he heard about the propulsion system, and could gravitational waves have been the propulsion system for the UFO?
different ETs have different technologies, the propulsion systems. This group of ETs, they have kind of a very advanced form of technology.
Anti-gravity, don't they?
Yes, anti-gravity. And also they form a magnetic field around this kind of spacecraft, their own magnetic field, so that when they move at a very super fast speed, the people inside wouldn't feel anything. People don't feel that they're moving fast or slow. This is something that I find to be very interesting, because it seems that their technology is more superior to other ET technologies that I've heard from the Grace.
Let's go to Norm in St. Louis. Welcome to the program. Hey, Norm, go ahead.
Another great show tonight.
Super. They're all great, Norm. They're all great.
I know they are. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to. I've agreed with George for 20 years, but I got to go with your guest tonight on the idea of if you can get to a paradise and where there's not mass shootings and corruption and all the stuff we deal with down here, I'd go there in a heartbeat. So he can take my phone number down if they contact him. He can give me a buzz. I'll go with him.
They probably already know where you are, Norm.
I'm sure they do. Second point was I think he was spot on with the assessment of problems of the world, with politics and money, whatnot. But I don't think it's so much money in itself as it is the wide gulf between the poor and the rich. There's 1% own everything, and they just had that Bilderbergs and WEF over there, or what it's called, Vagos or something, Switzerland, I think, and and they're all preaching this green earth malarkey, and I understand we need to, we got one earth, one sky, one water, but the thing is, they show up in Lear jets. They drive around in 5 miles per gallon, Lincoln Navigators and Lincoln Town cars and whatnot, drive around picking up $2,000 women for the night. I mean, I'm not taking morality lessons from people that are not moral people. So if I'm going to get morals, it's going to be out of the Bible, out of Jesus, not from these people.
Well, you're probably right about that. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think it's important to really focus on what Jesus taught us in the New Testament, especially the 4 Gospels. And I think that's actually the way to live, to grow more spiritually. And actually, I try to follow it to the letter, because love your enemies is really difficult to do. We all can get along with people who like us, but to love someone who doesn't like us, who is your enemy, is really difficult to do. But that's what's going to be more rewarding when someone passes on to the next lifetime. So I think it's very important to follow the teachings of Jesus.
Let's go back to the Great Pyramid of Giza, where you believe it is an energy center. Tell me more about that.
Well, it really is an energy center that can capture the cosmic energy, so that the user, like the pharaohs in ancient Egypt, they used it by meditating inside of the king's chamber, and then to communicate to people on other planets, because they can actually focus their energy, and to the extent that they can really instantaneously get the messages communicated to the people on other planets. So they have this kind of concentrates energy in a sense that it does miracles. And but according to this book, because of the shift of the magnetic poles of Earth, the current Great Pyramid of Egypt is not aligned well enough for us to use it again as the tool to communicate with other people on other planets. But whenever there's a civilization that has elevated spiritually to a certain level, they always build a great pyramid like the Egyptians did. There was another great pyramid on the continent of Lemuria before the continent sank about 14,500 years ago. That Great Pyramid was actually 3 times as large as the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And I think if we are spiritually grown enough, we can also do the same thing by imitating the pyramid in Egypt. The pyramid in Egypt was actually built by the person named Thoth about 17,000 years ago, over a 9-year period of time, using anti-gravitational technology and also supersonic vibrational system to cut the huge stones in a very precise manner. And I think if we handle those technologies nowadays, we can do the same thing. It's doable. It's just that how we need to work on that.
Fascinating indeed. Samuel, give us your websites if you would.
It's chinasona.org/Thiaoouba with the capital letter T, and people can search on Google my name, Samuel Chong, and Thiaoouba to find more information about
CHONG.
and the book.
And we've got the link for you on the websites, of course. But these books that you've been talking about tonight, are they still available to people?
Yes, they're still available to people, and actually reading these 2 books are the best investment I ever made in my entire life. I studied economics and studied the financial investments of Warren Buffett and Jim Rogers, but I think these 2 books are the best investment I ever made so far.
Good for you. We're going to come back in just a moment and take final calls with our friend Samuel Chong as he talks about ET technology and special knowledge that you can use to better your life. Now, don't forget our YouTube channel, of course, which is available to you. When you go to YouTube, in the search bar, type in Coast to Coast AM Official, or if you're on our website, coasttocoastam.com, right at the top, look for the YouTube icon, click that, and you can sign up with the other 529,000 members absolutely free. So take advantage of that. Back with more calls in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. We'll be back with Samuel Chong and take final calls in a moment on Coast to Coast. On our next Coast to Coast program for the first couple hours, Doc Wallach joins us from criticalhealthnews.com. And then R.J. Spina joins us to talk about consciousness on Coast to Coast. And welcome back to our final segment with Samuel Chong as we take your calls. His websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. How were you able to get the books translated, Sam?
Well, I'm a Chinese translator, so I translated Michel Desmarquet's book from English into Chinese with the help of others. And for the book 334 from German to English, that's actually a secret how I did it.
How'd you pull that off?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I was going to read it, and I thought it would be necessary to translate it into English, not only for me to read it, but also for others who want to know the secrets of the Illuminati to read about it.
Walter in Pennsylvania gets us started. Go ahead, Walt.
Hi, George. George's conversation is very similar to the one we had about a week ago. George, I've always wondered whether biologically it's possible to travel at or above the speed of light because, as we all know, Einstein said that clocks stop at the speed of light or time is suspended. Now, that also includes our biological clocks. So, at the speed of light, would our EEG and our EKG flatline? And isn't that exactly what is happening or what was done to Ted Williams? Ted Williams, you might say, is traveling through time and space without aging. He's in a state of cryogenic suspension where traveling at the speed of light, as Einstein implied, would put us in a state of space-time suspension.
Well,
so,
you know, he's dead first. Before they cryogenically froze him, he died.
Well, exactly right, George. Well, you have to ask yourself, is it possible to live without aging, George? That's the question.
That is a good question.
Would traveling at the speed of light automatically kill you?
I don't think it would kill you, but it would slow down your aging process, to be sure. Samuel, with the propulsion system of the ETs, have they learned how to bend space and time?
Yes, they definitely have through teleportation, but they can only do that in deep space. Otherwise, the spacecraft would have exploded. So they can only do that in deep space for some reason. And also regarding the time issue, they create their own magnetic field around their vessel so that it kind of isolates the vessel from the theory of relativity. And also, one other information is that the Thiaoubans, the Jehovah's, they can live forever because they can regenerate their bodies at will. So they always look like in their 30s, very beautiful and very youthful-looking people. And they never age because they're highly advanced people. And on Category 9 planet, they can just live forever.
Let's go to Jody in New York. Welcome to the program. Hi, Jody.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Samuel, thank you for your work. It's very interesting. I just wanted to ask you, also, I had a question about aging. I get a sense that we're not supposed to age and that aging is just wrong. It's like an abomination or a false mindset or an implant or something. So my first question is, I was wondering if the Thiaoouba said anything about us aging, separate from the other person's question about aging, through the time barrier, but just in general, living here on Earth and aging. And then the second question is, you mentioned the 12 families that are running the planet behind the scenes and how money and greed and they're killing everything because they're so greedy and all of that. How do we heal from that? How do we get out from under their thumb? Has the Thiaoubans mentioned anything about that? And the last question is, did they mention that there's anywhere on the planet specifically that has the highest vibration, that if somebody went there, it would be the most healing? Those are my questions, and I thank you very much.
Okay, regarding aging, well, it really depends on the category level of the planets. On Earth, we are a Category 1 planet, so on average, we live up to about 100 years on average. On Category 9th planet, they live forever, so they don't age at all. Interestingly enough, there's a very interesting specific fact in this book about Jewish people, the Hebrews. They originally came from Category 3 planet. So you remember in the Bible, they recorded that the Hebrews, they lived up to 900 years or over in the very beginning, but then gradually they kind of reduced their longevity by the hundreds up until like us. So I guess it's just my conjecture. My guess is that it has something to do with the category of planets. The higher the category, the longer that we can live. And for us, we have to learn how to live and die for about 100 years or so. The second question regarding the 12 families, and I think the book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, and the book, 334 Life, both books give a solution, which is the power of the people. Through collective and concerted actions, we can use nonviolent resistance to rise up against tyranny, just like Gandhi did in India, and also what Martin Luther King promoted. Because if you think about it, we, the poor people, will lose very little if we have a strike or something like that. And the wealthy, the super wealthy, the 12 families, they will lose the biggest, the most, because they benefit from enslaving us. If we act together in a non-violent fashion, resisting their control, then it's going to work very well. And your third question regarding the location on Earth, it really doesn't mention about the vibrations levels of different locations on Earth. However, it really just tells us that life is a learning experience, and we should fully utilize and take advantage of the challenges that we face in life to respond appropriately to the challenges in order to elevate our vibrations. So we don't need to really focus too much on where to live, as long as we focus on how we respond to the challenges that we face in life.
Let's go to final calls here. Thank you, Jody. Appreciate you being part of the program. John in Mississippi, first-time caller for us. Hi, John.
How you doing, sir? Look, I got something that bothers me every day, and I read the Bible, and I kind of figured something out, I believe.
What's that?
I believe that the Rock of Gibraltar, as legend has it, where Samson spread the earth apart at, and they got all these titanium plates down there. Well, they say wherever there's titanium plates, there's volcanoes in the Mediterranean Sea. Well, if that's the volcano, that's called Hades. And I believe there's an alchemy cult. You know, Lucifer and Satan. Anyway, the alchemy cult, like the game Jenga, where you pull out that piece of wood and everything falls. I believe they're going to destroy 25% of the planet, just like the Bible says. They're making war against the two prophets. I guess that's Muhammad and Jesus. But Jesus is God, you know. But I believe that the Bible says, or the Quran says, the two prophets and the Jewish people. They're making the holy people fight against each other, wipe themselves out. That's what I'm trying to say.
All right, let's get your thoughts on some of that, Samuel.
Yeah, I partially agree with what you said, because the purpose of the author, 334 Lives, of writing the book was actually to warn people about the organization, the Illuminati. When he was the head chair of the organization, he was leaning towards more like a symbiosis relationship between the Illuminati and the non-members of the secret society, like a more harmonious relationship for all people on Earth. But he was, the reason he disclosed everything was that he found out there was another person, like a younger person, more powerful than him in psychic abilities, in supernatural abilities, that was trying to take over him. And his idea is more evil, more like splitting the world, causing wars, causing conflicts. So he was trying to warn us that we should be careful, and the power of the people is what they're really afraid of. So even though they have supernatural powers and abilities, they're afraid of the collective consciousness of the people, the mass.
Next up, we've got Ben in Wisconsin. Hello, Ben. Take it away.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
George, you used to talk with someone who there was a buried pyramid, in a sense, west of Denali Mountain, which used to be Mount McKinley. And he's talking about, Samuel, that the Giza pyramid is perhaps not in the right position now because of the transition of the Earth. Can we count on all this? You know, because there's so many things, the connectivity of these positions now, and has it really changed? And what's happening with our change?
What is happening, Sam?
Well, it's just a natural change because of the shift of the poles. So the Great Pyramid of Egypt is no longer aligned correctly to be utilized as it was used in the past. But I think with our collective efforts, we can also use technologies that we had in the past to build another one. And I think when the time is right, we are going to receive help from the ETs.
You think they'll help us or not? You really do, huh?
I think they're helping us, guiding us throughout history, like using this book, for example, and also the stories in the Bible, and just indirectly because they never served a meal on the plate.
Next up, let's go to Leonardo in Minnesota. Welcome to the show. Hi, Leonardo.
Hello, George. And forgive me because I think about Bill all the time. And hello, Mr. Samuel. I just wanted to share my story with you, Mr. Samuel. I think that a lot of the things that you said tonight, they really touched home because I do believe that there's life outside of our planet. I've had my own experiences that I won't go into with some of that stuff. But I will just share what I shared with the person who was trying to figure out why I was calling. You really touched home when you talked about the God within all of us. By accident, in my life, I've always said that to people. People in my community where I live at, they've always thought I was crazy. And I said that God always has placed a piece of itself in all of us. And I said, we are all God. And people thought I was crazy by saying that stuff. And I've always lived my life by that. I had a stroke by accident. I was trying to I lost my job, and I went through 2 interviews, and they kept hiring me for collections, and then they put me in their claims department, and things wouldn't work out. Then they moved me to their collections department, and then finally they said, you're not catching on, and they let me go. And so the second job that happened on, I was in my bed, and I'm laying in my bed, and a light came up in front of at the bottom of my bed, and I kept trying to figure out. I said, "Am I dreaming or am I awake?" And then I realized it was an angel. She spread her wings, and it was like she was going to snatch me out of my body. And that whole day, I still kept trying to figure out, was I dreaming or was I awake? And I went to work, and I got let go of. And I know. And then I realized they took me to the hospital, and I had a stroke. And I know that these things do not happen by accident. So I totally believe in everything that you were sharing today really, for me, touched home, because God is within all of us. And I'm not a religious person. My mother's Christian. My father had passed away, was Islam. It's kind of funny how they met each other. But everything that you said, Mr. Samuel, really touched home, and it touches my heart. And George, I listen to you every night, and man, you do not know the service that you do for everybody.
Thanks,
so both of you. Take care.
Great statements. You take care of yourself too. We're wrapping things up here, Samuel. I want to thank you for being on the program again. Where can people get these books?
They can get it on Amazon by searching Thiaoouba Prophecy. And thank you very much, everyone. This is the best investment you will ever make in your entire lifetime. Trust me.
Thank you, Sam. You keep in touch with us. Samuel Chong, the book he's talking about that he had interpreted is Thiaoouba Prophecy. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lux Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.